When I started making this video this morning, my thoughts on the game were very down, that I wasn't happy with the way that the game has progressed in terms of the way that Premier constructed building your own deck style gameplay, 50 card, all that other stuff, the standard way of play that pretty much everybody plays when it comes to this game, how it has progressed in terms of what cards are good, what cards aren't good, what decks are good, and what decks aren't good. Long story short, the day before recording this video here, I went 0-3, 0-2'd 3 times with my Wedge red deck that I did a video on a couple of weeks ago. I was very upset because I felt like I went up against matchups that I should have won, and the games weren't close. There was one game that was close, but the rest of them were not. I got beat by aggro, I got beat by mid-range, and I got beat by control. And I have a philosophy when it comes to building and playing decks that if you cannot beat any of the archetypes, then your deck is trash. So Wedge, dumpstered. So as of the morning of recording this, my video was very dour. It was very, I'm upset about things. Then I went over to another location to play another game, not expecting anything when it comes to playing Star Wars Unlimited. I ended up playing my Boba yellow deck that I built, which is technically an upgraded Spotlight deck, but I did add some things. I took some tips from previous Boba decks. I took some tips from Django. Django and Boba play very similarly, but Django is unfortunately faster, which means it's better, because faster is better, obviously. I didn't expect much, and I was honestly very impressed with how well the deck did, even against a deck that pretty much is an auto loss for this deck, which is of course Django Tarkin Town. I was able to dodge the circumstance of having my opponent be able to use Tarkin Town on me for most of that game, the 2 games that I played there, but unfortunately my opponent just had every out imaginable, and the fact that Django can just free exhaust things is kind of busted, which is why he was the, you know, scourge of existence when it came to set 3, and he's probably going to be a pretty important piece of the puzzle when it comes to set 4 and its meta. But because control is kind of back in season, it might be an interesting counter to what Django has in play. So instead of taking a video and talking about how I'm upset with the game for the entire video and appealing to you all to build me a better deck, let's actually just go over the Boba deck that I played, and we'll talk about improvements that I'm going to make to this deck, and it should be very interesting. So first things first, a deck list. So here's our deck list. We went 2-1 in our event, a 2-0 against a double yellow Mando. We went 0-2, unfortunately, against a Django Tarkin Town, one of the best decks in the format, the terror of the format because of all of its free exhaustion that it can do. It is free. Exhausting a leader is not a cost. It's free, especially when he flips and he can do it to the entire board, which is nasty, especially when that War Juggernaut comes down. And then I did end up going 2-1 against a Boba Mirror that had more indirect damage, but I had better striking power with the stuff that I can do. So we'll go ahead and go over these really quick. 3 copies of First Order Stormtrooper. This is part of the Showcase deck or Spotlight deck. It's a very good card, very good with this Boba. It's probably never going to leave the deck because it does have the ability to be able to pump 4 damage out to your opponents. 2 from the attack, 1 from the on-attack indirect, and then 1 from Boba himself. 3 copies of Daring Raid, easy way to proc Boba's ability. 2 copies of Holdout Blaster. This was able to go on a First Order Stormtrooper, and it did manage to be able to do some extra damage with the Boba effect, but it is not good enough in this deck to stick around. This is definitely going to get cut pretty quickly. 2 costs, we've got 2 Cartel Spacers, 3 TIE Bombers, 3 Zygerian Star Hoppers, and then our events are 3 No Good to Be Dead, 3 Surprise Strike. It's your average stuff. I wish Cartel Spacer was a little better, but it can at least give us a vehicle for our pilots to go into, and then obviously No Good to Be Dead is good, not removal, but stalling, and then Surprise Strike is Surprise Strike. There's no better card for attacks than Surprise Strike. 3 costs, we've got Elite P-38 Starfighter at 3, 2 Fifth Brothers. This is getting traded out. It was part of the deck. I couldn't figure out anything else to put in. I have an idea on what to put in now. 3 copies of Triple Dark Raid. This was a last minute inclusion. Very, very good card. There's no reason not to run it, especially with the amount of vehicles that I have in here, so I was stupid to not put it in there in the first place, but I corrected that, therefore am not stupid, at least about that. 4 costs, we have 2 Dengar, 3 Fet's Fire Spray, 2 Hunting Aggressor, and 2 IG-2000. Dengar on one of our Underworld vehicles can pump out a lot of indirect damage, proccing Boba Fett extra. Fet's Fire Spray drops 2, can also put out another damage from Boba Fett himself. Hunting Aggressor increases all of those sources of indirect damage, and then IG-2000 is at least something that comes down and deals some extra damage damage, which can proc Boba Fett. There's a lot of things in this deck that proc Boba Fett, which is, of course, important. 5 costs, we've got 2 Boba, 2 IG-88. Boba's primarily a pilot to get that 2 damage when you put him on one of your transports, of which you have many. And then IG-88 can serve both purposes. A 2 cost, 0/3, so mainly for the health, but if your opponent has a damaged unit on the board, he becomes a +3/+3 for 2, but his unit side on the ground can end up being a 7/5, which is pretty nasty if your opponent is not prepared for it, especially if they're dividing up damage on their board with indirect damage and they can't get rid of their own units fast enough to not make you do that. And then our 6 cost primary triple dark raid targets are, of course, 3 Fett's Fire Spray, 2 Ruthless Raiders, and 2 War Juggernauts. All of them put in a ton of work. I actually ended up finding myself not really wanting to play Fett's Fire Spray as much as these other ones, so I might actually go down 1 Fett's Fire Spray and up 1 Ruthless Raider, because that is always a good vehicle, but I don't know exactly if I want to do that, especially since we need Underworld for Dengar and Transport for Boba Fett. Boba Fett leader flipping on 6 into a +4/+4 upgrade that deals 4 damage is super handy. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that with this deck. And then our sideboard is 2 Confiscates, 2 System Shock to be able to get rid of upgrades and pilots if we need to, 3 copies of Swoop Down if your opponent's got ground units that are troubling you, and then 3 copies of Shoot Down, which is an incredible card, especially early game against heroism decks that are running a lot of space, or villainy decks that are not necessarily running TIE bombers. If you shoot down a Zygerian Starhopper, sure, your opponent's going to be able to deal that 2 indirect damage to you, but you're dealing 2 to their base plus an indirect, and then you're also getting rid of their unit that's not going to be able to do that 2 extra damage on the next turn, and that is a worthwhile start to your game plan if something like that happens. And then any of these other vehicles that have 3 health that you can just shoot down and get rid of, super handy, super helpful. Not very good against the TIE Bomber itself, but if you can clear out as much damage as possible, maybe do 1 ping somewhere else and then shoot down on the next turn, you can do some interesting stuff there. So that's the deck list. There are some changes we're going to make. We're going to go over a couple of those changes here in just a minute, but let me know what you think about the preliminary deck list, and make some suggestions in the comments below on what you think I should add to this deck. Now, in terms of what goes where, I haven't exactly decided what specifically is going to get traded out for some of these cards. We'll talk about 1 or 2 of them when we get to the actual section about trade-ins. But I know that the Fifth Brothers have to come out, and I know that the Holdout Blasters have to come out. The Holdout Blasters are actually going to get dropped in favor of either 2 copies of Waylay or 2 copies of Breaking In. I'm noticing that I do need to have extra attack events, even if it only does give me +2. Having the extra backup against Saboteur is pretty good. That might even go into the sideboard if necessary, and keeping the Waylay in the main deck, or vice versa. Something like that is going to be very important when it comes to trying to get rid of my opponent's units that are troublesome with Waylay, or get through Sentinels with Breaking In, or even just getting the extra damage with attacks. That was something that I found that if I had even 1 or 2 additional events that could get me extra attacks, I would have won some of the games that I ended up losing. In terms of the Fifth Brother that's coming out, 3 cost unit, it's in the ground. We've got a couple of options here, and we'll go over each of them and their merits as it pertains to what they add to this deck specifically. So we have here Guerrilla Soldier, 3 cost yellow, 2 power, 3 health, Fringe Twi'lek Trooper. When played, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. If a base was damaged this way, ready this unit. Your opponent's pretty much going to damage the base every time unless they're willing to lose units to make it so that you can't attack with a 2 power unit. But realistically, the 3 indirect damage coming from this will do some work, and then your Boba will be able to add the extra damage on top of that, but will not trigger this because that did not come from this specific card. So this is an option if we want to keep the ground units in play. If we want to go with another space unit, we have Droid Missile Platform, 3 cost, red, 4 power, 2 health. The only one that matters here is vehicle and transport in terms of the, whatever they're called, the traits. But when defeated, deal 3 indirect damage to a player. Being able to attack for 4, and then if your Boba hasn't already been exhausted and your opponent destroys this, you can deal 4 indirect damage in 2 different packets. That's pretty strong. This was used against me very heavily by both the Django deck and the Boba deck, and I think I should probably add this in. This is probably going to be the #1 inclusion in terms of getting stuff in there, and it is a transport, which means that if I throw the Boba on there, I can do 2 extra damage, and that gives extra power and health to this thing, so it can either survive a little bit longer to threaten with that 4 damage, which becomes 6, or 4 power, which becomes 6 with the Boba, or threaten my opponent to make it them remove it, and I got the damage out of it anyway, right? We also have Hound's Tooth, 3 cost, yellow, villainy, 4 power, 3 health, underworld vehicle transport, so Dengar can get some extra use out of this. While attacking an exhausted unit that didn't enter play this phase, this unit deals combat damage before the defender. If I throw the Dengar on there, it's only dealing 5, damage total, but if I'm working with the Boba Fett, it can deal 6 damage total, and that might help me keep some of my opponent's units out of an issue of being able to clear my own units, and just keep my opponent's space units under control. I don't know that that's going to do too much with Jango, because Jango's effectiveness is not necessarily keeping those units on the board. It's keeping your units exhausted so they can do things without being taken down by anything. You throw that Ruthless Raider down, and then on the next round, if you have the resources, you can throw that Planetary Bombardment. That is a nasty combo for something that is already a really good combination to pull off. Then on the flip side, we actually have Punishing One. 3 cost, villainy, aggression, red, whatever. 3 power, 4 health, underworld vehicle transport. When an upgraded enemy unit is defeated, you may ready this unit. Use this ability only once each round. So you can throw either of your pilots onto here, or just leave it as a 3/4 that comes out on 3 that you can throw Boba Fett onto later. And if you attacked with this, you can throw Boba Fett onto it, defeat something that has, with the 4 damage that you get, defeat something that has an upgrade on it, whether that's an experience token or a pilot. You can do a lot of work with this and then still be able to attack in that same phase to do some extra stuff. So this might be an interesting inclusion. Maybe even we do something crazy, like we just go 1 Houndstooth, 1 Punishing One, or I think I'm going to try 2 droid missile platforms first, but if those don't work out, 1 Houndstooth, 1 Punishing One, to be able to do different things. And because they are unique ships, you don't have to worry about having too many copies of them, which is why we do have that package of 2 Boba, 2 Dengar, and 2 IG-88, so we don't jam up our deck too much with cards that we can't use if there's stuff already on the field. So I think we're definitely going to start with droid missile platform, and then, like I said, with the breaking in and the waylay, being able to move some of these units, these cards around to be able to do some extra stuff. And then, honestly, there's a lot of work that I think needs to be done in terms of my game play. I still would love to do something better with Cartel Spacer, but a 2/3 on 2 is okay. I could always try to throw Lurking TIE Phantom in, but I don't think that fits the deck enough. 4 damage out of Triple Dark Raid isn't terrible, but I think there's better targets with Triple Dark Raid, especially considering the fact that you'd have to play that Lurking TIE Phantom on the next turn to get as much value out of it anyway. There's a lot of interesting stuff that can be done with this deck. I like it. I was very unconfident walking into the event. Being able to win that first match shot my confidence through the roof. Losing the second match didn't do me any favors, but winning the third match in a kind of a nail biter there really did put me in a position where I think I might be confident enough in this deck to push it forward and do some more work with it and learn the lines and learn the things. So we're going to stick with this for another week or 2. I have a draft coming up on Wednesday, tomorrow, basically, as of the release of this video, where I'm going to be checking out the Jumper Lightspeed draft experience. It should be pretty fun. At least I hope it's fun, but I'll bring this little box here with my slide cased Jabba the Hutt. We did it that way, so that way I don't have to worry about having this big chunk of plastic on the board when I'm trying to throw the pilot Boba Fett out there. But I'm more confident in this deck than I was before. Like I said, we'll slide in those droid platforms and get those missiles going out, and hopefully we can do some extra indirect damage with that. I mean, being able to throw the 3 indirect and then an additional 1 from Boba is pretty good, and if you have that hunting aggressor on the board, it's even better. Lots of fun stuff, lots of good stuff. So I'm happy I was able to make a little bit more positive video, making a deck list guide, not even a guide, but just like my adventure with any methods necessary. That's kind of what this video should be looked as. But if you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you think of this deck. Let me know what you think of any interactions that are important that I might be missing when it comes to this Boba Fett deck. I like it a lot. I kind of wish it was a 5 flip instead of a 6 flip, but there's some interesting stuff that can happen with the deck anyway. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope this video made sense. There was a lot of stuff going on, different things. I had one idea at the beginning and I came up with a different idea later, but I think the better idea came out and has made it to you as a video for Star Wars Unlimited. Like and comment on this video. Subscribe to the Star Wars Unlimited channel for all of your Star Wars Unlimited needs. We'll be back again next week, probably talking about my draft experience and maybe even a constructed experience if I have some time. There may or may not be a video after that because I have a lot of stuff going on. But as I prepare for some big cash events at the beginning of May and then the regional qualifier at the end of May, we'll see how this goes. Should be fun. Should be exciting. Thank you for joining me, folks, and I will see you in the stars.